bit of a conversation about monitoring and reporting and some options there. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And again, good morning, everybody. I feel like every time this group meets, I come up with some issue that I try to shoehorn into the agenda. So it wouldn't be one of these meetings without that. So my topic of today is just thinking forward a little bit. This investment that we've received through SB 762, at least right now is from one perspective, kind of a one-time investment, but it's also a forward-looking investment and an opportunity to set ourselves up for future investment, not just from the state, but from other partners and other resources. And I think we all recognize that and have talked about that. And I think, as I think through the development of the 20-year strategy, looks like Zach was able to introduce himself there through the chat. Looks like he's having some audio issues. As I think through the 20-year strategy, and sort of viewing that as in part a blueprint for investment in the future, there are some other key components that I think are important. And one of those is really being able to tell our story. And that is something at ODF, and I think probably at we're not alone, that we struggle to do. And so by that, for example, I mean, that we often get requests from the legislature and others asking us some pretty specific questions about, for example, acres treated, or some other measure of impact. And we are often very challenged to answer those questions with any good specific numbers. And on the other side of that, operationally speaking, and some folks on the call here will know I've been thinking about this and talking about this for a long time. We ask our folks in the field to keep track of their work and keep track of accomplishments for different grant programs through any number of different processes and spreadsheets. And from that end of things, it's pretty challenging. And we don't do a good job of keeping all the data in one place. And this is an issue that I've discussed with our executive team, and it's a conversation we've been having at ODF for a long time, and we all recognize the need and the desire to try to do something about it. And I think now we have an opportunity to do that. A real sincere and serious need, particularly if we really want to try to pay this investment forward and set ourselves up for future success and future investment. And so, the idea here would be to leverage some of the position authority that we've received. So we've got a couple of NRS 3 limited duration natural resource specialist 3 positions that we received associated with FFR and SB 762. And we've been discussing and looking at using one of those positions to focus specifically on this issue and this need over the next biennium to help us do some work to collect, basically do an analysis, of all the data we've got and where we've got it. And then also to think forward about what kind of systems, mechanisms should we have in place, or could we build to do a better job and a more efficient job of collecting data and piecing it together and creating products to better tell our story, whether that be to the legislature or funders or other groups. But along with that, I also recognize, that we're going to need to make an investment in actually building those tools, probably a contracted investment of some kind. And so I really see an opportunity here to carve out a very small portion of this funding that has been provided to us to help build that tool and help pay it forward and help set ourselves up for success in the future. And I'm thinking haven't done a lot of legwork here in terms of specifics, but in my head, I'm thinking something in the range of $300 to $500,000 probably. And that would be some seed money that we could use as leverage. I think, in thinking about some of the other partners we work with at the Forest Service in particular, I think there's an opportunity to use that as match. And really make some meaningful progress on this work over this biennium. So I wanted to share that with this group and let you all know that, we're thinking about that. I think it's important. I really want to push on that and move in that direction. And I hope that's something that you all would feel comfortable with. So I'm going to just pause there and see if anybody wants to tackle me. So Emily Jane, you're not going to tackle me, are you?
No, I won't tackle you. But I did want to ask Jeff, is this aligned with the work that you're already initiating with the Ecosystem Workforce Program to develop a monitoring plan and conduct monitoring? I really excited about the idea that you will invest on the ODF side in some of this data collection and in tools and templates for that, but I also understood that potentially you're engaging the Ecosystem Workforce Program as an external partner. So could you just clarify that linkage, please?
Yeah, you bet, EJ. Thank you. And our plan is to continue to work with EWP very closely and build this out together as a team. I think that probably the line there of kind of where the workflow would go for us is that Ryan is probably describing something a little bit more of a system that might be in place, and that would include our GIS specialists, maybe even contracting with a third party specifically for collecting and managing spatial data and that type of progress, whereas EWP, I think, is more helping us plan and inform. And so that might be where we really kind of find that line of responsibility.
And I had that in my notes to address, and I looked over it. And I think Jeff's explanation is probably better than mine. And in my head, where I framed it up is, I think that the work with the Ecosystem Workforce Program is really focused, specifically on telling the story of this particular investment. And I'd like to build a tool that will help us to tell the broader story of all the work that we do, and something that we can use into the future. And certainly there's the opportunity for that work with EWP to inform this.
Thank you.
Pete.
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to ask a question that is not intended to undercut the importance of everything you just said, and I think, because I do think it's really key. I guess the question for me is better to understand the trade-offs that might be created by allocating the resources to this work. So what in your mind would have to not happen if you shifted the emphasis or the focus of that particular position to this kind of work?
Well, so are you talking specifically to the staff position that I referred to?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming that when you all kind of penciled out what you thought you needed to implement 762, you had a pretty clear idea of, gosh, we really need these. And you probably didn't even ask for as much as you really feel like you do need. So what's not going to happen if you shift this person's emphasis over to this other? And maybe you think, no, I don't think we have to let go of anything. They can do it. They can do both, or someone else will pick up the other work. But just wondering if there's any sort of loss or trade-off that we should be mindful of.
I mean, it's a great question. And surely there are trade-offs. The idea, I think, here is that we're kind of splitting the difference. So we had two of these positions that I think were originally slated to provide some direct field support. And we're still a little bit early in the conversation about, how to allocate all of these all the resources that we received, although we have moved along pretty well in the last couple of weeks. And so basically we're splitting the difference. We take this one position and really focus on this body of work, and utilize the other position to provide some of that field support directly from Salem. And, you know, in terms of implementation on the ground, there are some unknowns here, and we've recognized that as we've talked through how to use these positions over the last couple of weeks. We don't know exactly how yet, you know, what projects are going to be funded and what the workload is going to be associated with that. And so we're looking at some different ways to try to be flexible and provide support to the field, recognizing that our field offices are, you know, going to be engaged at the ground level, working with these projects. So that's not a direct answer, but it's the best answer I've got. I certainly, Jeff, Kyle, Alex, if you guys have other thoughts you want to jump in there. Alex, your hand's up.
Yep, this is Alex here. Pete, I think those, you know, we had three NRS 3 positions in there. You know, one was always kind of slated for Northwest Oregon to support the Federal Forest Restoration Program up there. Currently kind of a vacant position. So that one's still very much happening. You know, the other two NRS 3 positions, they always were intended to focus on kind of the monitoring aspects that were embedded in 762. So, you know, there's a pretty long list of things that they want us to report on. And we thought having a couple area level or, you know, either based in Salem or area level coordinators, you know, collecting that would be useful. So I think it might be, you know, an investment in like a software, for example, might actually make them more effective in what we originally intended them to do, which is track, monitor, and report.
Thank you. Amanda, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So, you know, similar to kind of what Alex was just saying, I mean, when I look at sections 18 through 20 and 762, there's a handful of things that the money allocated to those sections needed to go to. Fund a new program or expanded program into shared stewardship, you know, at ODF. That's sort of like, you know, the broad looking piece. There's fund the development of a 20-year strategic plan and the work along with that. Fund and develop fund development of strategic landscapes. So that's kind of the identification, that's work with OSU, right? Fund projects as identified in the bill to develop landscape resiliency. That's sort of what we're working on now. The monitoring pieces that Alex just talked about, and then the small woodland grant program. So like Pete said, I'd hope that all of those things have dedicated money associated with them. This piece that you're talking about, $300,000 to $500,000, it sounds like that really fits into kind of three of those buckets: the funding and development of a new program, right, of shared stewardship, or expanding what already exists at ODF. Sort of fits into that 20-year strategic plan, kind of forward looking. Then also specifically that monitoring piece around 762, but also that program of work that ODF already does. And that's why you feel like money appropriated for 762 would be able to be allocated to this type of work. Just want to draw that clear line, right? So I just want to make sure that I'm kind of capturing that correctly in my mind.
Yeah. So from my perspective, absolutely, and I appreciate that framing within the language and the policy there. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, before we move on to Kyle's presentation, we have a couple of folks that have joined us, and Chandra and James, thank you. You can introduce yourselves perhaps, and if there was a mix-up with the connection this morning, please send me a quick email after this, and we'll make sure that we get that right next time. Sorry for the delay. Chandra, go ahead.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Chandra Legui with Oregon Wild. And yeah, click the links in the agenda and calendar invite and got someplace completely different. So sorry to be late.
Thank you. James?
Good morning. I'm James Dickinson. I'm the regional fire ecologist for BLM and Forest Service, Oregon and Washington. I'm filling in for Jason Simmons. He's on annual leave. And yep, same issue this morning. Apologize for being late.
Thank you for joining us. Again, please send me a quick note afterwards and we'll make sure the links are correct. Okay, let's move on. Kyle, you ready to rock and roll?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep, I'm going to have Megan pull up my slides for me. But in the meantime, yeah, good morning, folks. Kyle Sullivan, started acting in this role actually in the departure of Phil Chang, which was way back in December of 2019, which seems like a lifetime ago, but and then hired permanently in this role as the Federal Forest Restoration Program lead in August. And let's go next slide. And I'm going to sort of blast through what the program is, the mission and its components, give you guys a really brief update on what the program is doing for the current biennium, and then really pose a question to this group. How does this forest restoration and resiliency implementation or investment program support wildfire risk reduction and resilience work on federal lands? And then lay out some possible additional investments that this program could provide to the FFR program. So let's go next slide. So for those of you guys who don't know or aren't familiar with the FFR program, the mission is to accelerate the pace, scale, and quality of forest restoration to increase the resilience of Oregon's federal forests in a manner that leverages collaborative efforts and contributes to the long-term vitality of regional economies and rural communities. Basically, the FFR program works to reduce wildfire, high severity fire to forests and communities, restores habitat for fish and wildlife, and works to create employment opportunities in rural communities. Next slide. So there's three main components of the FFR program that contribute to its mission to increase pace, scale, and quality of restoration on federal lands. There's Good Neighbor Authority, GNA, which allows ODF to conduct authorized restoration services on federal lands and basically allows the state to add capacity to federal agencies to implement both non-commercial restoration or service projects and commercial restoration or timber sales. And it also allows us to do some NEPA, some planning work too. There's also there's our federal partner support component of the program, and that's really about addressing the key bottlenecks to implementing and getting these projects online, which is the planning process, but also leveraging our workforce to implement projects on the ground. And we do that through PACE or planning assistance and categorical exclusion and our crew work. And then finally, there's federal forest collaborative support, which is supports the key function of forest collaboratives, which is building agreement among stakeholder groups to allow projects to proceed through the NEPA process, and trying to get to reach consensus on some potentially controversial forest management projects. And then also supporting our collaboratives and providing them technical assistance and science support so that they can have science as a basis of understanding and moving through, like I said, some controversial issues. Next slide. And so basically, this is what the state investment picture looks like for the current 21-23 biennium for the FFR program. It's kind of the right side of that flow chart in the previous slide. But I wanted to give just a quick rundown of what these things do for folks and give some examples of what we've done in the past. So planning assistance and categorical exclusion These are grants. It's basically a competitive process, but the intention there is to expedite restoration project planning on federal lands. And what does that mean? Basically takes the form of three main buckets. So it's either data collection in support of large planning areas, environmental assessments or EISs, funding smaller categorical exclusions and either ODF or the Forest Service contract to get the surveys and documentation ready for those smaller CEs. Or it's also looking at planning innovations. So how can we survey or find efficiencies in the NEPA planning process to make it be expedited and make it go faster, essentially. So that's what PACE is intended for. And a few examples, we funded the Ochoco National Forest 2,000 acre CE called the Bellwether CE. We also funded and had signed the Sugar Pine CE on the Fremont Wanema, which was a 7,075 acre project area. There's crew work funding, and it's basically that's the project implementation side, and that's leveraging that's in addition to FFR staff, like seasonal firefighters or folks hired outside of the FFR program, but working on federal lands to implement work. And in the past biennium, we approximately got 3,370 acres of non-commercial restoration work done, which is thinning, brushing, and piling, and 6,370 acres of commercial restoration prep work done. So cruising, tree marking, and layout for these crews. Project management is basically our administrative and back of the house line item. And that includes our monitoring work and some communications and media work as well. There's our FFR program staff, which is the 4 coordinators existing, 1 program lead, and then a portion of some of our G&A foresters in Eastern Oregon area. And then finally, down at the bottom, our collaborative support components. Collaborative capacity grants, which is administered by OWEB, intended to increase the number, acreage, and complexity of collaboratively planned restoration projects, which is basically the largest support for forest collaboratives in Oregon, which supported 12 groups in the last biennium. And then TAS, technical assistance and science support, that's intended to provide basically scientific expertise so that folks can build consensus on science-based forest management. And we funded fire history studies, outreach, storytelling, and communications work for the collaboratives in previous biennia. So yeah, that was basically an overview of kind of the state side, the state investment picture for the FFR program for the current biennium. Let's go next slide. And then, so this is just the fact that those 3 grant programs that I sort of laid out, the CCG, TAS, and PACE, basically they're all open. The CCG closes and we're going to have awards probably early November, hopefully, perhaps a little later. And then for TAS and PACE, it's those are closing November 15th and awards hopefully late in the year this year. So just giving you guys a timeline there. Let's go next slide. So really, this is kind of the meat of the discussion here. You know, how does this forest restoration and resilience investment program support wildfire risk reduction on federal lands, right? And does it involve project planning, you know, and what we provide in PACE? And does it involve supporting collaboration, what we do with CCG and TAS? And is that appropriate use of these investments? And does it does it make sense for the investments to go through the existing FFR program pathways that support restoration, or allow investments on federal lands to be determined by the competitive RFP process? Those are kind of perhaps two different pathways. So we'll just go to the next slide, and I'll pause there, and we can go back to any of the slides if you guys want. But what I was sort of laying out here is a potential investment that this, for us, actually a relatively small portion, but it would be to support PACE, CCG, and TAS. And what I've done here is just cited excerpts from Section 18 of 762 for that could correspond to basically, addressing some of that language in the bill, right? Collaborative capacity grants, and in the Section 18 of the bill, it says enhance opportunities for collaboration from stakeholders holding a wide variety of perspectives. And then for tasks, there's the support collaborative initiatives that address the underlying causes of elevated forestland and rangeland wildfire risk. And then, for PACE, it's evaluate varying types of fuel treatment methods. And I just pulled some language from the bill that may correspond there. And then there's some, potential dollar figures that could be added to these existing grant programs that would give a little bit more horsepower to those components of the FFR program. So with that, yeah, I kind of open up the discussion, and we can go back to any of the other slides. The intent here was to kind of provide a little bit of a menu for this group, to see if this sort of aligns with the investments in this new program, or if it's better sort of carried out in the competitive process. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any comments.
Amanda, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. There's nothing under project management. Who at ODF, or where is the management of this specific grant program gonna lie? Is it gonna be within FFR staff that oversee and manage these projects that are funded through the grant? Or I'm a little bit confused why there's nothing in there for that, or maybe I'm just misinterpreting.
Yeah, I think it would just be, it's basically these investments are just adding more funds to an existing grant process that will be managed by FFR staff. So that's kind of the short answer there. And there's not really any need for any additional funds to go to project management or staff. That's pretty much covered.
EJ, go ahead.
I don't know if I was first or if Pete was first. Or to Pete.
Go ahead, EJ.
Okay. Clarify. So you're talking about taking $400,000 of FRIP funds and putting them into FFRP for planning and capacity building type activities, correct? That's what this says.
That's correct. Yep, that's the gist. That's kind of what I've laid out here as a potential possibility.
And would those just be put through the existing mechanisms of FFRP? So it would just add money to the existing competitive processes for the collaborative capacity grants and tasks on those programs. And it would be still a competitive decision-making process, or would this be at your discretion? Or how you chose to invest this 400,000?
Correct. Yep. It would be basically, it would still be competitive. They would just add money to the budget essentially for these competitive grant programs.
Okay, and then this, I suspect we will get down to discussing shortly, but planning has been put into the draft RFP for the SCRIP, and I was just wondering if this would replace that, or if planning would still be an allowable activity as it currently is in the SCRIP draft RFP.
Yeah, perhaps we could address that in a few minutes.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you. Pete, go ahead.
Thanks. So again, not to take away from the merit of increasing the budgets and, like you say, Kyle, putting some gas into the, I can't remember how you said it, put some gas in the tank or something like that. But my concern, I guess, here is as I read the language itself, while the sort of the excerpts that you've pulled here that would indicate that, you know, they're looking for ways that Section 18 enhances or contributes to or supports these various, you know, whether it's collaborative efforts or identifying, evaluating various fuel treatment types. Those are merely, in my read of the language, and I could be completely wrong here, but in my read of the language, everything still tiers back to supporting implementation of projects, which to EJ's question, later I have some concerns about inclusion of planning in the RFP, but in my read of the bill, I think, you know, it's quite important that we look for, you know, projects that are going to affirmatively enhance opportunities for collaboration or projects that are designed to evaluate various treatment types, but it's still at the end of the day, they still go back to funding the project themselves. These are simply provided, in my read, as co-benefits of picking good projects to support for implementation. So again, I do think that this project, FFR, and you know, I'm a longtime supporter and longtime, you know, on the receiving end, having worked with collaboratives for many, many years, these programs are absolutely essential to what collaboratives do. I just have some concerns about whether it's appropriate to use 762 funding here. So.
Thank you, Pete. I'll just go down the list on what I'm seeing to the right. So if I've mixed up EJ and Pete, sorry about that. But I see Chandra next.
Yeah, I guess one additional thought about the appropriateness of applying some of the FRIP, I think, is the acronym you were rattling off there, EJ. I like it. For funding FFR programs, is that one of the other key priorities in 762 for this section is that projects for federal lands should be NEPA ready, and so I guess that just brings up the whole thing about planning, or, you know, supporting collaboratives to come to agreement around potential projects, or in planning assistance through this through the FFR program, because in theory, most of the projects should already have had NEPA done as opposed to working to set them up. So just wanted to throw that in the mix too.
Okay, I see Al and I see Eric, but Kyle, do you have any comments, or should we get to Al?
Go ahead with Al.
Okay, Al, go ahead.
Oh, hey, Kyle, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've seen some other reports you have that have, you know, what these investments translate into on the ground accomplishments. And so just looking ahead, you have some dollar amounts here, but, you know, can you kind of spitball what you think this translates to in actual on the ground accomplishments that this can facilitate?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? And I'm hearing, you know, the comments from all the folks, and I actually completely agree. I think the thinking perhaps is, you know, and maybe it's looking to the future, and similar to what Ryan was getting at, is like, okay, we will implement all the NEPA, ready stuff that's out there, and just do implementation. It's maybe just an eye towards, okay, if there's a sliver of this that does go towards planning the next project area and setting the stage through collaborative efforts to support that future project. That's sort of the idea and the premise here, but don't disagree at all with anybody's assessment on like the language of the bill, the intent of the bill. This was maybe just a little bit of forward looking, like, okay, for planning for the next one and really setting that stage. As far as outcomes, with PACE, that's one more contract CE, right? That's 2,000 more acres planned and ready in Eastern Oregon, potentially. For collaborative grants, that's like, perhaps that's, 2 to 4 more groups that we're able to support with facilitation or developing zones of agreement in that grant process. And then for tasks, maybe it's 2 more studies that these collaborative groups are looking to fund, so that they can, like I said earlier, have that baseline level of understanding of what is out there on the landscape, what's the historic condition, and maybe where we would manipulate fuels to get to that desired future condition. So yeah, I don't want to get too specific, but those would be some outcomes of those additional investments.
Okay, and I've got my mind in all these landscape scale restoration grants we're trying to get out. So I'm always looking at things in terms of, like, hey, what's the need and what's the unmet need that we have right now? And can you highlight just, for some of these programs, you do have funding, but is there an unmet need out there, and how would you characterize that?
Yeah, I mean, I could go towards just historic, right? These are all open currently, so it's playing out, and there's always projects like proposals that get that remain left unfunded, essentially, historically. So that's really all I can point to at this point. Like I said, these are open currently right now, so they haven't closed yet.
Okay, thanks, and I appreciate that. I know I was just coming with the questions that I had out of the blue. Thanks, Kyle.
Okay, staying with the timeline here on the agenda, I was hoping we'd go to about 9:50. So if we could have Eric and then Amanda, and then we'll move on into some other thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Kyle. Look forward to working with you on the CCG grants. So I guess my question is really kind of a follow-up on Al's, which is, how were these dollar figures determined?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was basically based on just historic, what we could get from these additional investments. And so, yeah, I'd echo a little bit of what I just said, but it's so that we can, get a couple more of these CEs done with PACE, or fund a couple more projects that are going to result in efficiencies in the planning process. There's not a specific, but it's kind of what I just laid out, right? You can fund 2 more projects with PACE, perhaps, right? And then you can support 2 or 3 more collaboratives that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do with $100,000. And similar with tasks, right? You can fund a couple more projects there.
Okay, so thanks. So it's something that could be kind of just scaled up according to, 100K could be 150K or 50K, depending on the level of investment, and it was a scale accordingly.
Right. Yeah, this is just a potential distribution. No, not really much rhyme or reason other than just based on what the grant is itself.
Got it. Thanks, Kyle.
Amanda, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I have sort of a multi-pronged thing, so I'll try to keep it short. But first off, I guess one of the concerns that I have is that it's the legislature's job to appropriate funds to different programs within the agency. And so obviously the FFR program was already appropriated dollars by the legislature, and this would go above and beyond what they already determined was the level that they wanted to fund this program at, you know, within the appropriations discussion in that bill, plus the POP, right? So I guess I'd be curious what, you know, strategic legislators would say about this. And does this kind of feel like now we're making a decision for them? So that's just one thing I just wanted to throw out there. And then two, how do we ensure that this money is specifically going towards the types of projects identified in the bill and would follow the priorities and the restrictions identified for the money in Section 18? So that would be another question mark that I don't necessarily have the answer to. I don't know if we'd have to get an opinion from, you know, for instance, DOJ to make sure that we're consistent with, you know, the language of the bill. Maybe I'm making it too complicated, but anyways, just another thought that I have. And then lastly, from my perspective, when it comes to planning, adding capacity, I really think that any money that came from sections 18 through 20 in the bill should be focused on the 20-year strategic plan development. I think that if we're going to do anything on forward-looking thinking, that's where the money should be spent in that process. I mean, I'm still a little bit concerned, you know, recognizing how much was appropriated for this specific piece of the bill. And it seems like the majority of it is going to this grant program. I haven't seen any numbers of what the department has identified as the funding for the 20-year strategic plan for that development, that process, and the implementation of that moving forward. Maybe that's a next session question, you know, long session question. I don't know, but it seems like for me at least, I would rather see any planning and this type of work be focused on that 20-year strategic plan development piece of the bill. So with that, I'll stop.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up, Amanda. Some future thoughts about that. There's some chats in here. I'm hoping that everyone can have an opportunity to see those comments. Within the agenda today, there's a few questions that are popping up that we're planning on addressing in the next hour. So I hope we can get there. Any final thoughts? Let me look over here in the chat real quick and make sure we're not missing something. There's some ideas about the competitive process we'll get to, and any slippage that we might have, and then some funding that's available for the 20-year plan and other portions of Section 18. So let's move on and try to wrap this up real quick, and then maybe answer these questions. But please keep in mind towards the end, if we don't circle back to this, then let's continue the conversation at a wrap-up time. So just to put the rest of the agenda in perspective real quick, I asked Kyle to join us really to give us an overview of FFR and how that program may integrate within the overall forest restoration. Kyle, thank you very much for your time. Kyle had an opportunity to kind of lay out a proposal there of what it might look like, but I want to remind the group in the gentlest of terms, the work group specifically, that you own this. This is your process. If you have an opinion and want to move forward with the FFR program as integrated through a competitive process, just like any other entity that might, then you can make that happen. If you decide that we should continue to look at maybe the one-off proposals through a tag and extend type of process where we can add additional funding where it makes sense, then we can do that. And we need to make a decision. And so I'm going to sound perhaps like a taskmaster for the next 5 minutes, because frankly, I think that we need to move the conversation on a little bit, because the window is shutting. And I think we all recognize that. So that being said, in the nicest of terms, I would like to pull up very quickly for the next few minutes, just a review of where we are, maybe bring us back to center, and then open up for some more conversation on where we go from here. So I'm going to attempt to share. There it is. Are folks seeing the did that share work? It didn't work. Sorry. Okay, are we seeing the timeline?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, just to circle back to kind of where we are, get us all grounded again. We're looking at the end of October, mid to late October, where we're establishing criteria for project selection and building requests for proposals. And that went out a week ago Thursday, or yes, a week ago, actually. Thank you for those that responded. We'll get to that here in a moment as well. And then as we approach November, we're really looking at getting the proposals out, the request for proposals out, and allowing a time frame for those to be dusted off the shelf, reimagined, reworked, and submitted to our group. So just wanted to remind everybody of kind of where we were. I also want to take a moment, if I can grab it. There we are. Okay, maybe we can you see the collaboration principles that we've been working from?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so meeting 3, which is this week, introducing proposed draft language for a request for proposal. And then we'll look at meeting 4 here as well as we get into the end of October, finalizing the request language and opening that proposal date. And so we just want to remind everyone that we have our meeting today, that we'll continue to have this conversation, and then we have a meeting next week, the 28th. And then our final scheduled meeting is November 4th. So just a quick update there. Thank you for allowing me to do that. I know that's somewhat tedious, but just wanted to, take an opportunity to kind of circle back. I get that. Okay. I think I'm done sharing of kind of where we are. And so wanted to maybe change the conversation in the agenda, change the agenda, excuse me, a little bit, and start talking maybe for a few minutes about making a decision today. And I know that we have a couple of folks that have jumped in for Dylan and Jason. So we can pause this perhaps and do it through an email or something like that. But I'd like to get to a point today where we really put a fork in the tag and extend concept, because the window is shutting. The advantage of that is beginning to close. If we jumped on 2 or 3 projects, and with Kyle's presentation, kind of giving us another option of adding funding to the FFR process, if we really want to go down that road, we can make that decision and move on it and take advantage of our time frame over the next couple of weeks. If we feel that that's not appropriate, then that's fine too. Then we'll be relying totally on the competitive process that we are developing through our other stream of effort, and that will move projects into the January timeframe. That's fine. That's your decision. We need to get there, but I'd like to not miss our window for tag and extend, because there are some projects out there right now that could be funded. I would also say, and thank you very much for those that have sent in some comments for the request for proposal, but it was only 40% of the work group. We had 6 people that did not send in comments. It's not a very long document, 3 pages worth. I'm really hoping that we can move on that and button that up as well by the mid next week, have a final review of that, and get that request for proposal out, say the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of November, because we keep in mind, we must give our partners out there a good 3 to 4 weeks with Thanksgiving in the mix of having the opportunity to dust off proposals, build them, and send them back in for the remainder of the process. So if we could, let's talk a little bit about tag and extend. I have as well, that I'll bring up, a list of projects here, and I'm really glad to see that we have Jason Pettigrew on the line and some of our folks that are out there making this stuff happen on the ground that might be able to inform us. And before we do that, let's get to Amanda. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just really quick, Jeff, just for clarity's sake, going back and looking at the email that you sent out with the RFP and everything else in it, it wasn't very clear that you wanted us to send you those comments. So I did provide comments. I didn't send them to you because I thought we were just going to discuss them today. So I think in the future, if there are like homework assignments that you want us to get done and back to you by a certain time, if you could just be a little bit more clear in the email that that's what you want, I think that'd be helpful for the group.
You bet. Thank you for the input. I appreciate that. And I'll be clear with the group and send an email out that we're going to send this document out to everyone with comments from folks that had submitted some. And by close of business, the 26th, that's a due date. So that's as clear as I can get. Close of business 26th. This document, we'll dust it off. Megan and I will look over it on the 27th. On the 27th. The 26th. Megan and I will manage that on the 27th, and we'll have it ready for a final review on the 28th. So thanks a lot, Amanda. Appreciate that. And my apologies for the clearness of that. Circling back now, I'm not sure if we're seeing this. This is, again, drafty. But to give you an idea, let me talk a little bit about the tag and extend, and let's try to button that up if we can.
You're not sharing. Oh, I see it now.
Okay. So we have a number of projects that are already in the queue. These have been funded through eBoard, which has been processed through either Western States Fire Managers rigorous vetting process or Joint Chiefs, as you'll notice here in Greater Lapine or North Warner. There's other projects in here that are a conglomeration of various pieces put together, like West Bear All Lands. There's another example. The acres treated, other deliverables that have been submitted, the contractual amount, and then expended to date. I do want to highlight, here's an example. Here's a contractual amount that we had 8 months ago or so of $120,000, expended to date at 129. So over expended. The only reason it shows that way is not due to mismanagement. It's due to the need and a modification midstream that said, hey, we've got more that we can accomplish. You let us go over and we'll deliver more. And that's really what that is. And so I teased out various projects that we're working on that we have agreements in place or recently closed. So they're in various stages of being implemented. And another that I'd highlight that I brought up, I spoke to John Pellissier. Here's just a quick example, and then I'm going to zip it and listen to you folks. Here's one that John assured me that if he had another $300,000, he could add $1,000 of burn prep to the Gilchrist State Forest. And I believe it's the Wainema down there as well that he's working with to prepare for a prescribed fire when the window opens spring or fall of next year. So that's just an example. I'd like to just get people's feedback at this point. Keola.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. And sorry for asking a question you all may already know the answer to. Is that a full inventory of what you would tag and extend? Like that's the total need, or is that just an example? Because I could see, having a portion of the funding go to that, and it seems like it fits the intent to quickly deploy, but you wouldn't want to put all of it there. I wouldn't think so. I'm just curious what that represents.
great point. That's a portion of projects. That's an example.
Okay.
And what I would rely on really is our other external partners, not external, but the Forest Service, the NRCS. There's other projects out there that ODF has not had a lot of influence or participation in, that we as a group could easily fund. And one that comes to mind is an Ashland project. It's a Joint Chiefs. I don't know the status. ODF has advised to some degree on the ground, but we were not a line item in that particular Joint Chiefs project. And so in my humble opinion, I have no problem with Andrew or anyone else informing the group that that project still has some need and we can continue down that road.
So, okay, that's really helpful. If that's the case, then would you set a limit on how much of the funding would go to through this process? And then how would you evaluate those projects against one another?
You tell me.
Okay.
That's what I want to hear today. And frankly, if we decide not to tag and extend, then I hope we can end that conversation and we can put all of our effort into the request for proposal that goes out in a week or so. Chandra, please go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. EJ, I see you next, and then Chandra.
Apologies because I did mention this last time, but the Lapine and Rimpenina projects are not within the 4 highest risk classes. Argue for some consistency in the guidelines we're using. So if those 2 are included, but others that maybe meet other criteria but aren't in the 4 highest risk classes are not, why? Thanks.
Yep, good point. Thank you. Chandra, please go ahead.
Yeah, and similar to that, I guess, and I think I brought this up in the past too, is, you know, I definitely want to make sure that the project, even the tag and extend projects, potentially have to go through, you know, at least some filter to meet the criteria of the bill and what this working group is working out. And so I guess my thinking about that is, if we decide to just drop them and they go through the regular RFP process that we're going to lay out, or I mean, if we decide to move forward with them and not have them to go through the RFP process we're about to figure out, I still feel like they need additional vetting. Maybe it's an abbreviated application of some sort, maybe not the full RFP, but you know, so that's a little extra work for us to consider as well, because I don't feel comfortable sort of rubber stamping any of these projects without running them through some sort of application or filter that we all agree on.
Great point, and really do appreciate the point. So what I'm about to say is really no knock on that idea, because I feel you're right. But I would say that we have a staff here that is running at 100%. And we're working our tails off to get the RFP out, and to go through a second vetting process might be quite difficult for us, maybe. So just a workload thing, and so it's a time thing. If we had years to put this together, maybe we'd just be able to do that. But we're talking about just, you know, a week or so or 2 to take advantage of tag and extend projects. So it's a quicker turnaround, maybe. I'm just not sure we can get there, but more than happy to think about that. No problem there. So thank you. Dana, please go ahead, and then we'll get Andrew's comments.
Yeah, a couple quick things. Do we have this spreadsheet, or is this just on your, was that something sent to us?
No, I just have it, and I'm happy to send that out. Not all projects are actually, I've been reaching out to each one of these project managers and not gotten everyone. So I was a little hesitant to blast that out and then have all of a sudden side conversations with other managers that maybe weren't prepared for that conversation. But over time I can.
Yeah, no worries, Jeff. I know you talked to the Deschutes because I had prepped them that money might be coming, and then later that day they got a call from you, so that worked out really well. And just back to EJ's question. So there's a few things going on there with and we've been talking internally about why Lapine doesn't show up better on the risk map as an easy example. And we think some of it is what we call the COFMAS effect. And for folks who aren't familiar with the acronym, Central Oregon Fire Management Service, COFMAS. But because they're so successful at stomping things when they catch on fire, that it may skew the potential risk in the area. But in real life, Lapine is where all the evacuations have been happening the last couple of years when there's fires in Central Oregon. So that's one of those like awkward things that like, are we missing things in the map that the greater community of knowledge knows about, and we want to find a way to incorporate with full transparency in these conversations a little better that still are in line with SB 762's requirements? I think that's a really important conversation, and in line with what Chandra was saying and some of the other things, we probably do need to go through that a little bit more deeply and capture it, because also, to be frank, to get this done with the amount of money and the amount of work we'd like to do in the amount of time we have, where we have planning shelf stock to implement is not going to be in all the places that are high risk on the map. They will be maybe the next time we have these funding opportunities, but they won't be by executable by June of 23. So one other piece to throw, so I hope that's helpful. Another round of projects that might be worth looking at are CFLRs, and I think you had some on the map, but we have that one in the Northern Blues that, again, there's limited high risk in the Northern Blues, but the approach that they're taking, I think, is something that we want to promote from every possible angle, because they're looking at doing roadside mechanical work so they can manage fires with greater decision space when they happen, which is really the only way we're going to get after the magnitude of the problem, is if we have a balanced approach like that. And that's why I'm confident that they came out number one. The first new CFLR project funded nationally is that project. And we had a success story on the Lick Creek fire this year, building on all of that good work very, very well. And we're working on a video, and there's been some press releases. Happy to share that if anybody's interested. Last one, Jeff, I don't know if this is on your radar, but the Rogue Forest Restoration Initiative project work that's going on in the Applegate Valley that Sustainable Northwest has worked with outside partners to do some considerable investment in. OWEB has also approved funding for that project area. They have another chunk that they could use money for. And I talked with Wamakatsi earlier this week. It's about $623,000 of investment, implementable, shovel-ready, cross-boundary, ready to go, and builds on some other things, and is in a red area. So just wanted to put that on the list if it wasn't already there, and I will be quiet now. Thanks.
No, Dana, thank you very much for bringing that up. And I've taken some notes here as well. Why don't we have Andrew, and then we'll go to Amanda, sorry. And then I just want to take a look while you're speaking over in the chats as well. And then I have a couple notes I'd like to bring up. So Andrew, why don't you go ahead?
Well, thanks to Dana, I'll be really brief. She had 3 out of the 4 bullets that I had written down. So thank you for that. Jeff, I noticed it on the RFP. There was a 50-50 cost share. I didn't hear you. And if you said it, I apologize. For the tag and extend, is there going to be a matching requirement? Or is that negotiable at this point?
Yeah, great question. And really, it's all negotiable. I mean, we own this. We don't have to have matching funds at all on any of these projects. I threw that RFP together knowing that there were some holes there, because I'm really trying to prompt the group into cussing and discussing a little bit and getting to the point that it makes sense. So that's up for grabs.
The reason I bring that up, I know some of the existing projects, that is a limiting factor, is the current match that they have for them to be successful. So we've got local communities that are obligated for a couple $100,000 right now to make these projects successful. And so if we throw more match requirements on top of them, just a topic for conversation I wanted to bring up.
You bet. Thank you. Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I completely agree with everything that pretty much everybody has said so far. I think some really great points have been raised. So another thing that I wanted to add, I like the conversation about, what is the right number amount as far as the appropriated money with these sections to go to this. I think that that's something we need to discuss. And then also, thinking about what Kyle presented for the FFR program and how we could engage that program. Perhaps if we do go down the path of tag and extend, maybe there's a way where there's there can be some sort of an agreement, or also extending or developing a new spa to be able to utilize GNA where there is commercial value, things like that. That might be a way to engage the FFR program, specifically in the tag and extend. You know, I think that if we go that route, I think that there should be a benefit, recognizing that we need to be making sure that we're good fiscal managers of this money. And I think that there's systems in place where we can add more to what we're looking at doing, right? So I just wanted to add that in there, if there's opportunity to do that, or you know, I think that we could make it even better than it already is, potentially, as far as the benefits of funding those tag and extend projects.
Thank you. Let's take a quick look over here in the chat. Some really great ideas are going back and forth about, you know, the competitive process and tag and extend, which is two kind of parallel tracks that we're discussing here. And then if they could be, Kaola, thank you, about quickly evaluated against the criteria that we're building as we speak. So that's another great idea. And then, you know, I guess I'm kind of thinking, Chandra, I'm reading yours as well. Thank you. What portion of funding goes? I guess I'm finding that we might be getting to a decision point, hopefully, that we can move on this. And so let me propose this. Let's take a look. Let's pivot a little bit and take a look at the request for proposal package that we've been looking at over the last couple weeks, or week, that is, and see if that fits. And then I would also ask, to Dana and Andrew's point, as well as thinking of Kyle's position as well, that maybe there's an opportunity for you all, and because I have a list of what ODF has been involved with, and I could pick out 3 or 4, you know, right now and say, boy, these are great projects, let's move. But that's not fair to the rest of the group. So perhaps we take a couple of days and you all specifically send me an email with 3 or 4 projects. Maybe we limit it, maybe it's 3, with some details, or where we can find the details. And we actually put that together. And by the time we get this request document finalized, we then have an opportunity to marry that up, use that as our criteria to see if out of the competitive process, but these existing agreements can be, or existing projects can stand that test and be funded. And we take advantage of the time, and we gain a month or 2 perhaps on, you know, any delay of that. Does that sound reasonable? I think that I'm getting a sense from the group that the tag and extend concept is not off the table, that there is some option there. If anybody's totally dead set against it, please let me know. Okay, Amanda, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just really quick. I mean, I think the biggest struggle here, if we really want to make sure that we are legally following the bill, we need to make sure that we're looking at the land use allocations of what those, where those projects are occurring, if there is the commercial component. You know, I mean, for instance, I believe the bill talks specifically to not being able to do treatments in riparian areas. So if any of those treatments occur in riparian areas, then how do we get around that? And is it through match? And so this color of money can't be spent there, but other colors of money can be spent there. I just think that we have to be really careful, you know, about what, you know, to make sure that the language of the bill is being followed. And it may seem weird coming from AOL, but I just think it's important.
Yeah, you're right. I think that that's part of the process that we're talking about. And if we feel that a project doesn't meet the exact criteria or the letter of the bill, then we just don't fund it. I mean, it's as simple as that. We don't need to fund it. There's so many projects out there right now that are ready to rock and roll. I believe that we're going to be picking the finest of the finest. I hope. Anyway, so, and Amanda, again, your point is well taken about you know, being thorough and looking at all of those. Let me let me kind of think out loud for a moment again. Thanks for humoring me here. Is that we can look at the criteria, we can build that document out to meet the best of our ability that we can. I know there's going to be some give and take there. And then we take a list of projects and we vet them against that document and have a chance to move forward with that. That gains us a month or two of process that we're getting projects moving on the ground, additionality of those projects. Again, any final thoughts on that? Does that sound like a plan? Chandra, please.
It does, Jeff. I just want to make sure we're not losing the other question that has been brought up, which is how much of our, allocated funding do we want to put into the tag and extend projects? And maybe we have to put them through the filter first to see even what the range might be. But I do think I don't want to lose that question.
Yeah, great point. And there's an option there too, isn't there? We could wait and see what shakes out and see if it's appropriate to fund, or we could put a hard number on it of what we feel comfortable and limit it to that. And we've always in years past we've partially funded projects, and that's still pretty good with ground managers that can do that. Pete, why don't you go ahead and then we'll get to Dana.
I just wanted to say I do support that. I think the rationale for using tag and extend, using existing projects is really important because we need to be able to demonstrate some early successes, some early wins. And at the same time, I think every point that's been made about the just absolute necessity to be really transparent with the allocation of funds based on criteria listed in the bill is essential. That's how all of our organizations are going to be able to feel like we can stand behind the decisions and that we can report back to the legislature that we followed the intent of the bill language and did the right thing with those funds. And I'm 100% confident that there are, like you say, Jeff, there are a lot of good projects out there. I imagine that many of these will fit the criteria very nicely, and we don't have to try to find workarounds, so to speak. I don't think that that's something that many of us would be comfortable with.
Great point. Thank you, Pete. And Dana, please go ahead.
Well, the last piece that we haven't really talked about, and this is something that the forests are really thin on capacity for this work right now, and dealing with a lot of pressure, and then also coming off of another big fire season, right? It's all the same people. And so when I think about tag and extend, one of the other benefits that we haven't touched on is managing our impacts on these call for proposals, because there's above base funding in Oregon, there's above base funding in Washington. Some forests are in both states here, obviously. And then also the Washington office just got a plus up in the continuing resolution, and there's going to be additional funding if and when Congress passes all their other work. So I think a lot about the impacts to my folks, and I think about how to be mindful of that. And if they've already gone through an application process and we can use those existing projects for the reasons Pete just outlined, I think that's really nice and kind, and as well as efficient for other reasons. If we are going to do that, I think it would be in everybody's best interest to try and acknowledge that as soon as possible, so that people don't reapply for something that we might already be considering because it's tag and extend, right?
Good point. Yeah, really good point on the time frame of how we get this out. Okay. Thank you. I think we're at a point where I've got some marching orders to put an email together that really buttons this up and kind of puts it in front of everybody that they can spend some time digesting this a little bit better. And that's just very quickly, that's about kind of a, what projects are out there, listing them out, building the criteria and following up on a potential tag and extend. Sounds to me like we're in a really good spot to talk about the draft RFP. And maybe we build that out a little bit and we take advantage of some homework. And by next week, we've got a really good product that we can rely on, where we can kill two birds with one stone. Sorry if anybody are bird lovers out there. I didn't mean to say that. And we can have that document inform tag and extend projects or new projects. Real quick, I see Pete and Chandra, and then let's move on. Are we still have hands up, Chandra?
Yeah, and sorry to thwart your moving on, but I just wanted to make sure that you saw and tagged that there's some questions about what all projects are eligible for this idea of the tag and extend. Is it just the e-board funded projects, or sort of what category of already vetted projects are we dealing with for this abbreviated process?
Yeah, good point. I think I'd like to line that out maybe in an email as well, okay, so that people can look at it. But at first blush, any project, frankly, that would meet that criteria that we build out over the next week, and we measure these projects to that. The only thing that would be obvious about a tag and extend is that there's an existing agreement, and that the mechanics of that are already in place. That's really what we're gaining.
Okay, that's I think that's the important piece there, is that there's already an agreement, contract in place.
Things are happening. Yeah, so that's really the delay, I guess, in time over time, is that the agreements and the DOJ review and the so on and so forth. That's where we're gaining some ability there to get money to the right place. Okay. So thank you. We got about I don't know, 40 more minutes or so. Let's pull this up and take a quick look at it, answer some questions. I know I'm missing some in the chat, and I apologize. I'll make sure I go through that with Megan and make sure that we get all that lined out. I'm kind of juggling here, and I don't do that all that well sometimes. That's it. Okay, I'm sharing. Okay, are we seeing this draft request? Great. And now, of course, I have a small box here and I'm missing people. So Megan, if you can watch for thumbs ups and hands and things like that.
Hey, Jeff, but really quick, can you just zoom in for us?
Oh, you bet. Is that better?
Yeah, maybe one more click. That'd be great.
Is that getting pretty good?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, cool. Okay, so again, I don't want to, I wasn't expecting that we might go through this word for word. One point that I'll make real quick is that, we got some great comments and edits back from folks. And it was, things like, hey, let's put a comma here or change a word. And so, we're all really pretty comfortable on just making, those types of grammatical changes, just some there. And so there's some that are of more substance. And a great point here, it's forest and rangeland. That wasn't in there. So, when it comes to substance, I think I'd like to just take an opportunity to highlight those. And then Megan and I will look at the document and really kind of polish it, grammatically, and make sure that things are reading well. And we'll have some time, like I say, over the next few days to build this out in a little bit more detail and get everyone's comments for next meeting. But anyway, this is something that was built off of the Western States Fire Managers process, something that has been vetted and utilized across the West for years, and it's been utilized, I think, very successfully. And then we threw in a little bit of ODF lessons learned as well to try to build out a document, knowing that it's not perfect, and we really want to hear all those little bits and pieces to make it better, frankly. So anyway, moving through, Rangeland is a great addition. Thank you very much. I'll try to answer some questions here. And again, I'm not seeing people on the screen, so please stop me if I need to move on. Okay. It's important, Eric, but not substantive necessarily. Okay, eligibility. Oh, great. Yeah, you're right, EJ. I don't think that this paragraph needs to be in there at all. That's a little bit of fluff right there. Although, some opening of kind of what's eligible. I really would like to maybe get to a point that a few have made, that implementation versus planning. And I think this is probably an easy rock to break. in my humble opinion, this is an implementation proposal or a request for implementation. Gosh, I wish I could see people. Let me see if I can get this screen up. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, I'm learning as we go. Thank you very much. Andrew, I see you have your hand up.
Hey, thanks. I really like the implementation piece. I wanted to spend just a second on the planning. I certainly think there's value in paying it forward. I think if we can throw a sentence or two looking at return on investments and or clarify that if we're going to spend money to do planning, CEs, the NEPA work now, that there is going to be a proposal in 23, for example, for funding. That I'd hate to do NEPA or hate to do some planning that's going to sit on the shelf and we don't get a return on our investment. So somehow if we can creatively weave that in, that it's, if we spend $200,000 on a CE, the goal is to turn that into $2 million of funding in the future. So I think we got to somehow creatively wordsmith that in there. But it's not just doing a CE or doing planning for the sake of planning, that it's going to have a return on investment.
I see a lot of nodding heads. That's really a good idea. Thank you. Any other thoughts specifically about that comment? And then we'll get to Amanda. Amanda, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, we got everybody going now. So, so I'll try to be really clear. So, when it comes to the implementation, I do see EJ's comment there. I think the intent of the bill was to really focus on implementation, to really show that we are kind of proof of concept here. We're actually getting work done with an eye towards planning with the 20-year strategic plan and moving forward with planning in future long sessions. But anyways, related to the implementation specific paragraph there, I'll send you all my comments too, Jeff. Sorry that I didn't do that before, but I really feel like we could simplify it and just say, on the ground execution of projects on public or private lands, federal projects. It's kind of a weird transition there, but federal projects, and then just remove everything else that says that contribute to a landscape more resilient to disturbance or improves watershed health. I don't think we need all that fluff in there. And I specifically wanted to comment on the defensible space treatments. I recognize that the bill talks about, protection of homes and human life and things like that. But I do want to be really clear that work, defensible space treatments, are not landscape resiliency. Those are different types of treatments that achieve different things. And that specific work will be getting completed by OSFM. And much of that can be funded through the Small Woodland Grant Program and the Community Risk Reduction Fund that OSFM is going to be managing. So I just want to be really clear about that. I think that, it's great work, but I want to be really focused on what this is supposed to be funding, right? Is really landscape resiliency, and defensible space is really about saving homes, in kind of more manicured fashion than more the general broad landscape resiliency. So that I think that's good for now. I'll let others chime in.
Great points. Thank you. And I would just remind everyone, I know you're thinking about it, but this is that forward-facing document that goes out to partners. And so, they're going to be looking at this for direction on how to build proposals. So yeah, great points. Thank you so much. Andrew, did I get you already? I see your hand up and then I see, okay, Chandra.
Thanks. Yeah. I agree that making sure that the language and describing what is eligible is important since it is public facing. So I appreciate keeping it short, Amanda, but I think, yeah, we definitely want to be clear, about the intent in this description. But on the planning side, so you can see some of the red stuff in there were my comments. I added like /analysis, and I just wanted to maybe kick off that conversation because there's a really I thought really good list further down in the document that are examples of what planning projects might be. And I'm hearing, and I believe I agree with most of the thoughts on this needs to be focused on implementation and not on planning. But this analysis piece that's the word I'm using. It might not be the right word. It's something that I find intriguing because the project, sort of the examples of things that might qualify that are further down the document, I think are really great sounding projects that meet the intent of this bill in the sense of, evaluating fuels treatments and, how well they work, monitoring sort of stuff, effectiveness monitoring sort of stuff, analysis of, anyway, the examples are there in the document. So I'm curious what folks think about maybe changing the wording here around planning and whether it might be more of a priority to fund some sort of analysis. And again, I don't know if that's the right word, because that just is intriguing to me, and I think fits, but it would mean changing around some of the language in this RFP.
Great point. Pete, why don't you go ahead?
Chandra's point, great segue into mine. I think, Chandra, you're using analysis. I'm thinking monitoring and evaluation are the terms, but I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that the bill clearly outlines the importance of monitoring and evaluation. And in my mind, I clearly distinguish sort of phases of projects into planning, implementation, and then monitoring and evaluation. And in my mind, these are separate concepts. Andrew's point earlier got me rethinking my initial reaction to not including planning, because hey, that's an innovative idea, Andrew. Like, how could we think about planning if it's linked to future, maybe even a way that we make a case for future funding for this program, because we say, hey, we also created a pipeline for projects to be implemented down the road with similar funds. But my initial reaction to planning is like, I really feel like we have to be able to demonstrate, effective implementation on the ground in the next 18 months. And I worry how, by diverting funds to planning, even though Andrew's point is valid, like it sets up a pipeline for potentially future projects. We have a lot of already planned work on the ground that's ready to go and could make a significant difference in changing the trajectory of landscape resilience, community risk, et cetera. We need to really make hay with that stuff that's already ready to go. And I think it's our biggest bang for the buck. So I'll just leave the planning piece at that and second Chandra's point about monitoring and evaluation. And then on the implementation side, a couple comments. I think if we're going to list sort of types of treatments, I think we need to be a little bit more exhaustive or a little bit more comprehensive. This is, to me, speaks very heavy to sort of mechanical treatments. And I think that there's, if we're going to list them, I think we have to be including other, using prescribed fire. Hey, let's really set up landscape scale prescribed burning, or hey, let's set landscapes up for managed wildfire, and be clear that, in here, I'm not saying we want to support, fund necessarily a project for managed wildfire, but I think this is, to me, needs to reflect the outcome we're trying to achieve in terms of landscape resilience, which I don't think is going to be achieved in the long run without fire. And then a couple other just some terminology things. I think forest health tends to be a loaded term because it can be interpreted differently by different audiences, what that means. And so I'll send you my comments, Jeff. Again, I apologize. I read your email and said, just come prepared to discuss. I didn't see the part about send them to you ahead of time. So I'll send you comments on the other sort of terminology pieces.
No, and thank you. The apology is mine. I'm sorry I wasn't clear enough, and my problem. And so we'll move on that and make sure that, excuse me, we're all dialed in for next week. Great points. And gosh, planning is such an important component. And like you say, there's some shelf stock out there, and people have put plans together, and maybe a component of this. Well, I hate to even throw it out there, but I hear there's a focus on planning, then there's a focus on implementation, and that is probably mitigation, and then there's a focus on evaluation and wrap up and monitoring and how we do it. So there's really a three-pronged approach to a successful project. and potentially, I'm just throwing that out, maybe it's built into this, is that, you know, there's some planning that is proven in the proposal to some degree. There's a timeline on what mitigation project or what the project looks like. And then there's a component of evaluation and monitoring as well. And that's all built into the proposals that we receive. Maybe it looks more like that. I'm also getting some dings from some comments here. Let me make sure I'm getting things correct. I'm having a hard time collecting chats. Anyone have a comment that they've put in the chat that they'd like to bring up now, instead of me reading through these? Great, Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, Jeff, just to Pete's comment there about kind of monitoring and analysis, or what we might want to call that, to me, that would be a part of the project. I mean, the way that I read the bill, you know, it's that we're monitoring those projects that we're funding through the appropriations of the bill. So to me, that's why it wouldn't be two separate categories. That would be a part of, or should be a part of, the proposal for those implementation projects. So that's kind of where I'm sort of differentiating this kind of planning. It seems like it's the monitoring piece is really all within the implementation. I just don't read the bill to say that we should be monitoring or planning or analyzing other projects that were funded through other mechanisms.
Okay, right.
Just a quick note, I 100% agree, Amanda, and sorry if I was confusing there. I think we should just make it clear to applicants that they could include the monitoring component in the proposal. So.
Okay, Chandra?
Yeah, just on the point I made earlier about how some of the projects types listed under the examples of planning that I think maybe are lost if we're talking about monitoring, and otherwise I agree with you, is things like projects that evaluate the effectiveness of fuels treatments and actually produce findings, projects, and then like some of the, well, I don't even know how you would do this project, but you know, projects that are more of an analysis of needs, that sort of thing, that are listed there, that wouldn't be monitoring of the projects, but would be their own type of project. And so if we think that those types of projects would qualify, evaluating effectiveness, for example, we would just want to be, we would not want to lose those somehow.
Thank you. And you know, this may seem a little crazy to go back and forth like this, but I'm telling you, I'm taking some notes and hearing a lot of really cool ideas, and I think that we'll be able to build this into something that we're all feeling really good about next week. Let me, to your point, Chandra, bring us down here to this particular line item, in that that's a potential for the proposals, in that we accept all of these, but there's a portion that must be mitigation. And then there's other components within the proposal that are monitoring and evaluation, and those are acceptable, but we try to put some figure or percentage on the bulk of the project being a fuel reduction project. I'm seeing some heads nodding. Amanda, I see your hand is up. Is that from earlier?
Mine isn't up, but Dana's is.
Okay, whoops, there it is. Okay, Dana, please go ahead.
Yeah, you just hit on one of the points that I've been thinking about. We've been talking about this a lot too. It's without going into a lot of background, but it's been really hard to get focused fuels reduction work done in the agency, and a lot of funds have gone to restoration work that may or may not actually have a risk reduction component to it, and sometimes often actually increases resistance to control of fires rather than produces the outcomes that help us mitigate against unwanted fire effects. So even though the language I was just reading through the bill again to make sure I wasn't missing something does allow for restoration activities, it's not ever listed at the very top, and I do think we want to think about how we prioritize those kinds of things, and as clear text as we can be about that, that would be to our benefit. The other thing that I wanted to just throw out We've been trying to find a path forward on getting a streamlined consultation process completed, similar for folks who are familiar with the aquatic restoration biological opinion for Oregon and Washington. That really helped us with the NEPA process, get a lot more planning completed for work that's restoration and aquatic ecosystems, but includes thinning of juniper anywhere. And we would like to do something similar for roadside mechanical work and landscape burning. We know there's broad support for those kind of activities. I feel like it's possible that that could be something we put forward in this competitive process, but am I reading that correctly? And is that, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on that question here, but I think efficiencies along those lines could be beneficial to all the work we want to do. And I feel like there's broad enough language in the bill to include approaches like that. When I'm giving advice to the forests on their proposals, or we're thinking about it on the agency's behalf, did what I described sound on track to something that we would consider? And does our language, is it inclusive enough that that is obvious to people? I think really to bring it home to what we're working on now. Thanks.
Thank you. Any thoughts from the group? Well, my opinion, Dana, is that those are appropriate projects. There are opportunities for that. I think that what we can do within this document, and we are walking a fine line on making a document that's 100 pages long with all the details, or allowing it to be rather open, and allowing those really good ground managers out there that are familiar with these things to build these things. So I've got a lot of confidence in those folks out there. I know you all do too. And I think that, we can build this, that it's open enough that we would, and I'm even hoping that we'll get proposals in that will surprise us, that will be really creative, progressive in thought, new ideas, and we will be able to see those for what they are, as some new, interesting ideas. Just my thoughts off the top of my head. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, although I'm sure there's people who are thinking right now. I'm finding this to be really fascinating. I hope you are too. I'm getting excited about what we're building here. Okay, so let's back up here. Implementation, planning, evaluation, monitoring. I'm hearing a lot of great comments. Let's take some time over the next couple of days to collect everyone's, and then our team here will really nail that down. And I think you'll be pleased in what you see next week, in that there's some real focus there, and it's edited to with these ideas in place. Let's move on a little bit into some of the real particulars. Andrew, go ahead, please.
I'll jump right in. I'm sorry to interrupt if you were going there, but I had two quick thoughts.
Shut up, or I need to hear you.
No, I've looked at some of the comments here. It would be great to see if we can get to a place where we nail down the match. I don't like the 50-50 for short turnarounds. I was thinking match it up with the 90-10 WFHF style grants, and I think we'll see a lot of work get done that way if we rely on local partners to try and spool up $1 million in the next 18 months. I think we're going to short ourselves with that. The next bullet down, I struggled a little bit because I don't know what our total kitty for this tag and extend is. So I think if we can figure out, are we talking $10 million, and therefore we'd support 3 projects, or knowing what our total amount's going to be can really help on that second bullet. And so maybe those two would be I don't know. I'd kick off just for the sake of conversation. I think a 90-10. And then based on what our total dollar amount, that's going to help with that second bullet. Maybe those are 2 decisions we could get to.
Amanda, please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that the match needs to be addressed. And we could have different, if partners are able to bring a certain level of match, maybe that project is prioritized or something. I don't know exactly how we'd want to do that. And then, I have similar concerns about that second bullet point. But again, feel like if we've got a really great project that costs a lot of money, maybe we don't want to spend over a certain amount. So maybe that project gets a lower point, but then it ends up getting more points in a different category. I would hate to turn down a project because it's achieving too much, right? It's because it's treating so many acres, and it's, if it's able to be completed in the time allotted, I wouldn't want to discredit or just make that project completely ineligible. But maybe again, we can have a point system that addresses that. And then the last thing that I really want to touch on is in this specific set of bullet points is the word organization in the 5th bullet point down. I'm having a hard time understanding what that is. So for instance, would the BLM, the Forest Service, NRCS, would those be considered organizations, or would they have to go through a third party, like a sponsoring organization, to be able to go through this proposal, right? So I guess I'm a little bit confused about who is actually eligible to apply for this money, and what organization means in this capacity.
Yeah, good question. Chandra, just a second. I'm thinking, the language in the bill, really, this is general fund. It really encompasses all lands. And so the word organization might not be appropriate, but there's an entity there that really is pretty wide ranging. And if it's good work and it's cross boundary, then doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned on who sends a proposal, and we can read it and review it. Chandra, please go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking to the stewardship contracting, specifically the Siuslaw Stewardship Watershed Restoration Program that distributes retained receipts dollars to non-federal entities. So that's what I work a lot with that program. And so there's a couple of examples that I wanted to bring up. One is that we've had this conversation about match before, and the language that we use in that application process is that that 25% match in funding or in-kind contributions is recommended. And that way, when we get together to as a working group to determine where the funds go, we can have that debate, like, hey, this one only has 10%, but it's super high priority and seems like totally makes sense, versus, this one maybe not the highest priority, but it brings 75% match and they're just asking for a small amount, and sort of weighing things that way. So the recommendation is, strongly considered, 25% or more, but it's not a requirement. So that's just one suggestion. The other, and this is a little outside the scope of this, but since I have up my guideline here, the other thing that we say is that projects should be scalable, which is a way of then, if there is extra funds, for example, or we really like it, we can allocate a project a little bit extra, kind of like the tag and extend sort of stuff, because we see that, a little extra money would go a long way in accomplishing more acres or whatever it is. So I don't know if we want to make that a requirement or a recommendation, but it's something that has worked well for the stewardship group to consider. And then finally, on the amount of money or the limitation for funding per project for the stewardship stuff, we haven't set that limit, but we make it like this project does, or this program does too. Set it lays out how much money we have, so it's clear to people that they shouldn't ask for all of it. And we're talking about a much smaller pot of money for stewardship dollars on the Siuslaw, but we don't set an upper limit. Again, it's something that we discuss when deciding how to divvy up funds. If we feel like someone's being too greedy, that's a consideration. Or if we think that we can get more bang for our buck funding, multiple smaller projects, we have that option. So just things to consider.
Yeah, great points. And Amanda, I see your hand up. We've got about 10 minutes, and I find that we're moving along nicely with some of this. There's really 3 or 4 points right up here that let's try to nail down what 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe these top 5 bullet points right here. That would gain us a lot. So, let's say that we go with a match requirement that is recommended at 25%, and we decide, make those decisions as they roll in. That's a great idea. If we feel good about that, I can make changes there. Maybe we don't limit any of these. I just threw that in there to get your feedback, in that, if there's a group of partners that get together, potentially they could be 30 different partners that ask for $20 million, and holy smokes, that might be exactly what we need. It's a little bit ridiculous, I know, but maybe there is no maximum, and we just see that, unless we want to put some boundaries around that. Maybe there is just a minimum. I would stand a little firmer on minimum, because it would be very difficult for us to manage $30,000 projects. And so we're really looking for big landscape scale projects. And other than that, I wouldn't be too firm on that. And then maybe we have a quick conversation about if there's the 70% and the hazardous fuel, and then we can change the word organization. So I'll zip it right there, but let's try to hit those points as if we can. Amanda, please go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing on here. This can be pretty quick. It's more of a question to the group on that third bullet point. I think it's good to have the minimum. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also wanted to raise the point over limits on overhead. So there's a limit here, do not include equipment purchases totaling over 15,000. But what about overhead, like cost for employee benefits and things like that? Because I've seen projects where there was a lot of cash being sucked off of the entire application into employee overhead and third party overhead costs that weren't actually going to implementation or to contractors and things like that. So just wanted to throw that out there if that's something that people have seen in other grant applications. Again, just trying to focus this money down on the actual implementation. So just something that I didn't see in there that I had a question about. So.
Great point. Eric, I'm seeing your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate that comment, Amanda. I also want to stress that there is sort of a cost of doing business here. And if they're, depending on the entity or the organization that is going to be implementing, I think do need to recognize that, that they will be expending, some time and labor, obviously, in doing the project itself. And, I think at OWEB, we generally look pretty favorably on applications that do include a fairly robust amount of, overhead might not be the right term, but, project management, things along those lines that really help not only implement the project, but kind of make sure that we have organizations that can do the work in the future as well.
Yeah, good point. And Andrew, I'm seeing your point there in the chat too, that, sometimes that 25% match is right there in overhead costs or indirect costs for an organization. And that makes some sense too. So if we change the language in here, and maybe, I can massage that match requirement to be more of a 25% recommended, and then maybe put some limitations on 3 million, and maybe remove that, but that we have a minimum of 300 or 400 or 200, whatever the case may be. The only reason I put 300 is that's our limit on Western States Fire Managers grants, and that tends to be about the size of a project that groups can put together, rather quickly. Equipment purchases, a point about that, and some of our federal partners will be quite familiar with this. We are typically limited of spending that because of the, the equipment is long lasting and it goes well beyond the project cost, and then the depreciation of equipment over time. Very difficult to track when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. And so are people feeling comfortable with a limitation on equipment? To me, it makes sense in that there might be some that needs to be a kickstart, but not necessarily just an opportunity for organizations just to buy a bunch of equipment. I'm seeing some nods. Okay. Again, let's use the next couple, 3 days into the early next week to add some comments here. And we'll take those all into consideration, and I think have a product for next meeting that's going to look good.
Oh, Jeff, sorry. I was trying to raise my hand if I could interject, because I just wanted to make one point before we close.
Okay.
I think I looking at like the intent of the language itself and the focus on increasing landscape resilience, I think that I think we could, and I would like to see us include some reference to projects that are, are designed around the best available science about what is effective. We know a lot, and I would rather not like sort of, not say that and then have projects that are coming out of left field when we know so much already about what is and isn't effective. To exclude that, it's a simple addition, and if folks are amenable to that, I just think it'd be something that we could evaluate projects against, given that we do know a lot about what is and isn't effective, whether it's reducing wildfire risk to communities or increasing landscape resilience. Just seems like a simple no-brainer to me, but others' thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree, Pete. I think I made a comment somewhere in the document of many comments about, having treatments that have demonstrated success in, reducing fuels, increasing resiliency, that sort of thing. Language in there would be really good. And science would be a great one to include too.
Okay, thank you so much. I recognize, or I feel like maybe on my part, that might have been a little clunky in trying to look at a document and then follow through the chat and all that. So my apologies there, but I will say that for my benefit, and I think our team here at ODF, these are awesome comments. This is where the rubber is meeting the road. We're building something that I love the idea of being able to utilize this as a test for tag and extend projects. There's a comfort level there because we're looking at this as guidance, and we're also building this at the same time to get it out there for new projects. So again, we're doing double duty here, and I think that's awesome stuff. I have something that I owe you, and it will be an email that will be this document cleaned up, taking comments, or I tell you what, this document will go out, and then we'll allow a couple of days. I'll get it in the email to give us feedback. And then by next Tuesday, we will really hammer this thing down into something that really is kind of polished up and makes sense. The other thing, what was the other thing that I wanted to get out? Oh, I'll send it in an email as well, but I would like to get more of a tag and extend approach on projects that you all see fit, that maybe that comes from our federal partners typically, and we get those as well and collect a more comprehensive list of projects that we will then be able to vet against this criteria. Am I making sense there? That's in my head. Chandra, go ahead.
That does make sense, Jeff, and thanks, and sorry for raising my hand at the last second. I just thought of something that I wanted to ask earlier and forgot about. There's the public meeting on Monday evening, correct?
Good point.
And so just a reminder perhaps, but also I'm curious how you're thinking you might deal with, any public comment and feedback that, might be different than what you're getting from this group, and how it might be incorporated either into this document, into a report. But it would be great if we could look at that and consider the public feedback at our next meeting, which is after that meeting. I know, I'm sure we have a full agenda already, but it just seems like it shouldn't go into it. The feedback shouldn't go into a black box, and I'd love to see it.
You bet. And Ryan, I see you just popped on. We had this conversation yesterday and this morning. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my hand down and turn my mic on at the same time. It's complicated. Thanks for asking that. And I was just making a note to myself that we needed to bring that up real quick. So we do have that public meeting. I think you're all are in the loop next Monday, the 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. And I'm really hopeful that a number of you will be able to join and participate in that conversation. The idea there, and in terms of the public feedback, is that we will give a presentation with kind of an update about an overview of these elements of SB 762 and conversation about how we've gotten to where we are now and where we're headed. And then there would be a Q&A session. And the idea using the Zoom platform is not that it's an open mic kind of scenario where folks have, like a limited amount of time to say something, but really a genuine Q&A opportunity with ODF staff, and also I hope some of you available to engage in conversation. And then for folks who want to submit more detailed comments, there would be I think we set up a 7-day period following that where folks can write those things down and submit them to us. And we would summarize that feedback and bring it to all of you at that next meeting for consideration in your process here. So that's the idea. And I know I've just put us over. One other thing that was on my list, Jeff, I think another good thing to produce for conversation is a little bit of a budget around the $20 million allocation here, and how much might go to tag and extend, and some of the other things that we've discussed. And thanks all for your time today. Really great conversation.
Yeah, and great point, Ryan. I can certainly work on putting that together. Of course, it's going to be draft. It's going to be a shot in the dark, but it'll at least get us to a point where we're seeing something and beginning to have some comfort level on what that budget looks like. So thanks a bunch for everybody's participation. The visitors that we had today, thank you so much. Please call or email if you have any further comments as you stand in for work group members. Please continue to be involved. And help us through this process. Thank you all so much. I'll get an email out to everyone in the next day or so and line this out very clearly, and we'll move on. So again, have a great day.